That's different. That's not household carpet.
All right, good morning. Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Call the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee meeting for August 23rd to order. Appreciate all the committee members being present.
Thanks, sorry.
First order of business is to approve the minutes of our prior committee meeting. Supervisor Smith, second Supervisor Peg. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Any comments from the public that might be here this morning? Privilege of the floor. Any committee members? Non-committee members? All right, we'll move to the agenda. And we welcome to the first committee that she's attended, our new administrator for the Sign Council's office, Julie Garcia. Julie, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Please take the podium.
Okay, thank you very much.
So we've got a couple of items. The first one is a request to enter into a contract with the Legal Aid Society of Northeastern New York. Any background on that you need?
Yes, so we wanted authorization to enter into a contract with the Legal Aid Society. They're our conflict defender in the Warren County Family Court. They provide Warren County with 2 attorneys who we turn to when the public defender has a conflict. So it's important for us to go to Legal Aid Society first before going to the 18B panel because we have a contract with them. So I'm requesting authorization to with the Legal Aid, so we can contract with the Legal Aid Society for paralegal case management.
All right, motion to move this forward. Supervisor Leggett, second Supervisor Smith. Any questions for Julie on this? Supervisor McConnell.
Julie, thank you and welcome. Welcome to the upper floor. Hey, do we usually have conflicts or, 45,000 doesn't seem like a lot of money. For attorneys, so.
Right, so I think it's 3 times a year, it's $15,000 that we pay to the Legal Aid Society. And yes, especially in family court, there would be a lot of conflicts because there are 2 parties to every case, not to mention an attorney for the children is appointed through the law guardian panel. And that's funded through New York State and not through the county. So yeah, there are a lot of conflicts. There would be in family court. The public defender obviously can't represent both sides.
That's true. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Supervisor Leggett.
This contract we have every year, is that correct?
I think that this contract has been around for a long time. Yeah.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Second item is a request to amend the county budget. Julie?
Yes, I'm requesting that we amend the 2023 budget to recognize year 1 of the ILS distribution number 13. I believe our portion of that is going to be $29,000, and then the public defender gets a portion of that distribution as well.
Motion to move this forward. Supervisor McGowan, second. Supervisor Smith, any questions, comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. There's one discussion item. That's to discuss the relocation of the assigned council office to 333 Glen Street in Glens Falls.
Yes, so I've only been in the office for probably about 6 weeks. And I think it's important that the assigned council have a larger space. What we're experiencing at this point is we get 2 or 3 applicants who are coming to the office at the same time. It's difficult to have a conversation with them regarding their finances and their cases confidentially. The other day, I almost had to go out and get a picnic table so I could meet with a client while Renee was meeting with another person in the office. Since I've been in the position, we've extended the assigned council hours of taking applications. Before I came into the position, Warren County was only accepting applications, I think from 9 o'clock in the morning until noon. We've now extended that. We've extended those hours and we updated the website yesterday. So we're taking applications from 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. daily. So that way I think we can meet the needs of the clients more quickly and efficiently. But our space is significantly small. I mean, there are two of us in the office. I'm trying to do Teams meetings while Renee's trying to meet with clients. It's very distracting and difficult. And again, there's a confidentiality issue with regard to discussing cases in financial situations with people.
All right.
Just so you know, I would prefer staying on campus, but I just think there's a lack of space right now from what I've heard, and I've talked to a variety of people. I don't want to move the office and keep it down in Glens Falls forever, but maybe temporarily until some space here frees up for us.
Okay, further information from our administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has been on my radar screen since I became county administrator. We've known that the assigned council spaces are way too small for what they do, and they've been in this situation for a few years now. And we looked at space, and I kind of think at some point, if we decide after we do the county morgue study that the morgue is not going to go in the former jail wing, then we do some renovations there and we'd be able to expand spaces, maybe accommodate the assigned council office in larger spaces and more accommodating. The issue is if we decide not to do anything with that, then we're going to have to figure out how to fund any renovations we're going to do to that space after we remove the old jail. So it's still 2 to maybe 3 years off before we have good reasonable space if it wasn't a morgue. So that's why we believe this is a pretty good solution, at least temporarily, 2 to 3 years, and then at some point we'll be able to move them back into the municipal setting. Thank you.
Supervisor Conover.
Yeah, would this come under the existing contract we have for space at this location, or would this be a new contract?
I believe this would be a new contract, and I believe that we met with ILS about a month ago, and they indicated that they would be very willing to help us with this rent, if not pay the most of the rent for us.
So the thinking right now at a minimum is that this would be temporary. First, a lot of times our experience is temporary seems to become permanent, as you know. So the thinking should be, long-term, until such time as we have appropriate space developed here at the center. Is that correct? Yes. And any idea what the cost might be for that additional space?
For the additionals, I'd look back at Julie because I know she's been talking to him. So
Yes, I've had conversations with the groundskeeper at 333 Glen, and the cost would be about $1,000 a month. And like John said, we've talked to ILS and they said that they would be happy to fund that space for us. They know how important it is for us to have a larger space and a more professional setting when we're meeting with clients. So the rent would be about $1,000. That includes everything except for the cleaning fee and the cable. We'd have access to the conference rooms. There are 2 there now. They're building out a 3rd one. The conference rooms would be used for continuing legal education classes for the Warren County 18B assigned counsel program. We're hoping at some point to be able to do CLEs here, so we can train the attorneys and they can get their CLE credits at little to no cost if we're able to do that. The conference rooms can be used for a variety of reasons, and because there are going to be 3, we would never have a problem with booking a conference room if we needed it, or if we needed extra space for the 18B attorneys to meet with clients. Some of the 18B attorneys do not have their own office space, so they would be able to reserve a conference room through the assigned counsel program to meet with a client or to review discovery. They also have televisions there and high-speed internet, so if they had to review discovery or have meetings with experts, they can do it all right there at 335.
Supervisor Conover.
Yeah, I mean, do we make this contingent on indigent legal service funding? Do we make the move contingent on the ILS funding? And then my only other comment would be that is the such that if the funding should not arrive, we don't do it, or if it's terminated in the future, do we withdraw back to the center? Are we going to be able to withdraw back to the center? And And as a property owner. We'd be having discussions with them about the potential short-term nature of that.
I have discussed the length of the contract, and he said he'd be willing to negotiate, the contract. We could do a 1 year, a 2 year, or a 3 year contract. And I have no problem considering whatever the board would like me to consider. I can go back and negotiate with ILS and let them know that you would like it to be contingent upon, future funding. I don't think that that would be an issue, but it's something that I would want to discuss with them. And then I can circle back with you, I can circle back with you before the next meeting or at the next meeting, but any questions that might arise after today's meeting, I'm happy to have conversation individually with supervisors or via email, whatever's convenient.
Supervisor Smith.
Yeah, I have some questions, but Supervisor Conover answered some. Thanks, Ron. But following up on that, because this is kind of the time to talk about it's budget season, right? So would just to kind of counterbalance to what Supervisor Conover says, maybe it's prudent to budget for the $1,000 right now if we're going to go ahead and do this, and if the money comes in, then we're good. If the money doesn't come in, we're not in a spot for it. Just an idea.
Yeah, I like the idea.
What, question, is this a long-term contract or month to month or?
I believe Julie said that we could do 1 year, 2 year, or 3 years. I think I'd recommend that we do a 3 year contract. Because I feel very comfortable we won't be able to get into additional space at the municipal center. Funded and ready to move into within 3 years.
And they have space available now, obviously?
Yeah, I went and looked at space. It's about 1,000 square feet, $4,000 a month. It's a nice space. It's on the 3rd floor. It's all handicap accessible. It's a very secure building. And the public defender's office, as you know, has space on the 1st floor. There are a couple of other attorneys and 3 other attorneys that rent space in that building. So he said the build out would be done. I would anticipate November 1st as a move out date. It's important for us to be on campus right now, just because of the resources. Tammy's been wonderful. All I have to do is call. She comes down. She helps us with any questions we have, and to be learning from the public defender's office and Aaron Brothers, who's across the hall. So that gives us a few months here to get our bearings and our feet firmly planted. But I think we'd be ready to go by November 1st, and they told me that they would have the space ready by then.
Supervisor.
I just wanted to clarify, are we talking about the travelers building? No,
Yes,
we are. Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Supervisor Leggett.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What would we do with the space that the sign council would move out of?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have no immediate plans for that, but it's basically one room, if you haven't seen it, with a glass window and a little kind of a cubby hole that you go stand into. It's basically one room that's about 20 by 20 square, 20 by 20 feet, so that 400 square feet about.
The highest bidder.
We need additional storage space for emergency services. That is right down the hall. And I think that could come in handy for them a little bit. So without any renovation requirements, once they move out.
20 by 20, you could fit 4 PD attorneys in there.
Other question,
PD's looking for space, as is probation. So
That's right.
we're a little bit light down there.
Yeah.
Supervisor McGowan.
I think this is a good idea for an intern. And I do agree with the 3 years because how long it's taken us to get to where the morgue is, but I will bring up when we did a walkthrough with the morgue. I know we're waiting for the design. But they're only gonna need a small portion of just the downstairs. We get the whole wing down there. And I really it's been a long time. Now it's been cleaned up. So, and now we're taking, we're really just focusing. We need to look at or really at least start to smooth out the floor so we can, move some. Let's do it in piecemeal instead of, one big project at a time where it would cost more money. to make it an ease for Julie and her department, I think it's a great move and I know you don't want to go, but I think we ought to put something in the facilities there to see what we can do to, you know, pick up some momentum over there.
Any other questions from the committee? Supervisor Conover?
I'm just. In my mind, it's. Not. I think it's a good move. I think if we can get the ILS funding, all the better. I don't know that we should make a contingent on that. And I don't think, if we should not get the funding, I don't know that coming back to. One room situation is ideal. And the other thing to remember is. You can pick the square footage, but let's just use rounded off, say, 600, 700, 800 square feet at today's renovation rates. So 1,000 a month seems to me to be a very for downtown, very affordable way to go for any number of years, if whatever the time is required. So thank you for you to reach out and set the stage on something like this, because I think it's a good move.
County Administrator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to say, we've had very many, both Tammy and I have had a lot of discussions with ILS since, we've been moving towards the restructure that we've done in the assigned counsel's office with having an assigned counsel administrator who's an attorney. They've been very cooperative. I know there's no guarantee on any of that funding. However, they've been very flexible and supportive of us going forward. And I am fairly confident that if they say we'll fund this rental for you, that we will get the funding. Thanks.
Okay, yeah.
I would also like to mention that the resolution, if you guys move forward with this, is going to include the cleaning fee. So I would just double check and make sure that's included as well in the price. I know the public defender's office about $350 a month extra for the cleaning fee, I believe. So I would just include that with any resolution requests moving forward, because that would be contained in the lease agreement as well. So we would need approval by the board to execute the $1,000 month lease agreement with the cleaning fee as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think what we'd like from the committee at this time is just permission, a consensus that Julie can move forward and we can begin negotiations in earnest with them. And then we'll come back to the committee next month with a proposal that will go to resolution.
All right. Committee, any disagreement with that?
No.
Move forward?
Now let's go.
Okay, Julie, thank you for being with us, but
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
thank you.
All right. Have a nice day.
You too. All right, public defender, we got 5 items plus 1 discussion item. And the first is a request for a new contract for ILS.
Yeah, I know that that's a routine item, just to continue.
Okay,
I apologize for the
that's our
third string here, but the public defender has a court appearance and the administrator is going on vacation. So we're breaking the bottom of the barrel here.
well, I'm not sure we can combine it. They all look individual, but you
Yeah.
want to handle it?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Or want to bring it to the floor?
Second, Supervisor Smith, all in favor?
All right.
Opposed? Next one is extend the contract with 333 Glen Street for lease space. We just talked a little bit about this. Any other information you need on that?
No, I mean, I think it's.
All right, motion to move that. Supervisor McGowan, second Supervisor Smith. All in favor?
All right.
The third is to delete part-time assistant public defender and create a per diem assistant public defender position. This is the best utilized resources. This is an ILS funded position.
It is. I think the concept here is looking at ways to creatively address difficulties in staffing. And it looks like the per diem positions are more flexible. You know, obviously, if you have per diem attorneys who are governed by a cap, let's say they're retired, you know, and make 35,000. But depending on when you retire, you know, really, I, as a per diem, could work for the rest of the year, 5 days a week, if there was a need. And Jeff Ferguson is not retired, this would be his position. Then depending on need, he can ramp up to 5 or less. It's just an attempt to be more creative, given staffing shortages.
Motion to move this forward, Supervisor Conover, second.
Better recently. We have been able to, you know, both new and experienced attorneys recently, so that's a good sign.
Supervisor McGowan, second, all in favor?
Well,
No,
oh, should we do the details on that per diem? How is that paid? Is that, and is the pay in line with your full-time?
it's in essence the same pay rate. There's no change in pay rate. So whatever that position was making. They'll continue to make it.
Thank
So
you.
it's
All
in
questions?
essence an hourly rate.
Supervisor Conover.
Yeah, I mean, we've used a per diem approach in other departments, very well. Health department comes to mind, but nurses, things like that, but congratulations. I think that you're really trying to make the best out of a very difficult labor situation.
Right, yeah, and I think the efforts at recruiting, which we've got to restart again this year at entry level people. Like I said to the board before, when Greg put me in charge of this. You know, 30 years ago or whatever, I was talking to Sterling, begging him for a job. And even 10 years ago, people were doing that, and now it's just not the case. It's, the employers now need to recruit, and just across the board. But if you do it, you can get some results.
Supervisor Conover.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about putting someone in a part-time position and then that's it, but under a per diem basis, you could be working with any of a number of attorneys. So really, it could even expand on your and a lot of these are per diem maybe start off at a certain level, but maybe like it and willing to do more later on. I mean, I think it gives you that kind of reach.
Certainly sets the stage for that ability to get that flexible. And I think that's the first sign.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Fourth request is through transfer of funds.
I believe that salary from one position to another position, maybe the part from full to part-time. Per diem.
Motion on the floor, Supervisor Leggett, second. Supervisor Smith on the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. The last request is for a new contract for AAA all court transcripts.
It's a contract with an existing vendor. And I also think, just not that I was asked, but I think it's also covering county attorneys as well for their transcript needs.
Motion to move this. Supervisor Smith, second Supervisor McGowan. Questions, comments, Supervisor Smith.
Yeah, so the commencement date's the 18th of September, right? And this runs for a year. Is that correct? Or is it, yes, annual? So how does this work with a budget? Is this going to be prorated this year, then put in the budget for next year? To get it more on a budget cycle for payments, or is this going to be something kind of odd? Pay me. I guess I'm asking Greg. Like,
Yeah, this is probably an anniversary date, isn't it? On the contract? Anybody have the contract? Because this is basically a renewal of the contract. We have them already, correct? AAA,
Yes, we are using.
and the increase in price is because we're expecting more work to be done by them.
I think it is an increase in the cap. And this is not a predictable number. The number of times you may need a transcript for an appeal or some other thing may change. Some years it may be high, some years it may be low. And I covered this, Aaron, as I understand it, the county attorney is also going to be under this contract as well. So again, it's cap. It's the ability to spend that much, but it doesn't mean we're going to spend that much. Gotcha.
And did their, sorry,
No, go ahead. Yeah.
did their per day or per page prices increase at all on this new contract? Were there price increases?
I can ask that question. I don't believe that was the primary issue. I think it was including another department and just raising the cap.
Raising the cap.
Again, this is a not to exceed. So
Right.
it's not a guarantee that.
Yeah, it's not a predictable number. 1 year, we could have 1,500, the next year we may be coming back because, you know, the litigation's demands require more. But it's just raising the cap. They're very pleased with this particular vendor. I didn't get that much. Very responsive, which in all industries now is an issue, you know, how quickly they get back to you. From plumbers to transcriptionists, and they're pleased with this person.
Supervisor Connell.
Yeah, to answer the question, though, I mean, I think that I would assume that next year's budget should reflect the 5,000, because that is the cap, that is what we're authorizing. And that within this year's budget, it would have to come from one of two places. There'd have to be a transfer for an existing line item of their existing budget to this contracted service, or it would require an influx of funding from some other source. And
Any other
if
questions?
that were to happen, the department would have to, you know, that's decision-making time, right? I have the money within the budget, I need to transfer it from this code to this code, or you know, you're making a call to the budget officer. Thank you.
Other question?
Just, Kevin, it says here, transcripts from $1,000 to $5,000 annually. Do you know what the actual transcripts have cost the county?
No, I'm not. I
Okay.
wouldn't know that now. That at one point I would have been able to tell you what the general price per page is, but I'm out of that business.
Okay,
I
yeah,
don't
thank
know.
you.
But what the concept is from the public defender side would be there be a hearing, a suppression hearing. A map, an identification hearing, or a hearing about a statement. On a major case, and you may each, you request the party might request the defense, or the prosecution might request a transcript. And it would have to be transcribed. The other concept is if a local court had occurrence, they're all taped now, and there was something that happened out there, you may send that. Tape out.
And the $1,000 number just appears very, very reasonable, you know, they say
Yeah, I think
like
at
it.
I think at that time that met the needs. I think that from what I'm being told, and I'm doing a little bit of repeating of information I gathered. Is they're combining both county attorney and the public defender, and this is a cap. Who knows, it may be not exceed $1,000.
County attorney, have something, Wayne?
So in family court, the number of, I can speak to our department, the number of juvenile delinquency cases have tripled in the last 2 years. I think in 2018, we've seen between like 4 and 6 JD petitions, and now we're looking roughly, it's midway through the year, we're already at 30, between 30 and 35 JD petitions. That just means that the number of appeals are going to go up, and the need to order transcripts are going to go up. And I've typically seen that probably for like a 15 to 20 page transcript, you're looking at between $100 and $200 per transcript. And if you have a half day trial, all day trial, you're looking at, you know, a lot more pages and more need to get the transcripts.
We typically charge by the page.
Correct. Yep.
All right, any other questions?
When Bob gets up there, I'm gonna ask Bob kind of a general philosophical question. And okay, when we hear the number of youth cases involved in probably in communities all over the country, the question is kind of why? What's going on out there? I mean, you know, that could be an all-day discussion, and certainly we don't have all day, but just kind of a couple of fundamental tidbits when you get up there, you know. So.
All right, we'll move this. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. You have one discussion item, that's reference to the attorney salary study.
We're not being told that there's a commitment on the county level by the county administrator to initiate a study of attorneys hours. And that's probably a good idea. As I spoke to them last time I was here, this whole public, the 18B assigned council rate has affected things, it will affect things. But I do think having study on it makes sense, but I don't know any more than that. I was part of that discussion. I just know that happened, or at least it's agreed to be happening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're going to conduct an attorney salary study in 2024. So we initially thought going into this budget cycle, we'd do it, but we made the decision to stick with the attorney salary schedule that we currently have. We know we're going to face some pressure from this increase for the 18B attorneys across the state at $158 an hour. We know that will potentially impact us. So we're gonna look at salaries of attorneys. We know that some of the other counties are hiring attorneys at a higher salary than we are at the beginning. So that we're just gonna look at that next year and we'll come up with a recommendation sometime throughout the year. It will go into the next budget cycle for FY25.
Thank you. Anything else? Supervisor Conover, did you have something?
Just generally, I mean, I think we're facing this challenge in a number of places in terms of our labor force. So we see the outcomes to mind right off the bat. And so I think while you're looking at the attorneys, you might want to think about some of the other problem areas that we have. Because this problem exists not just here in the county, it exists with the state of New York, it exists at the local level, it exists with the school districts, it exists with, as you know, mass transit, which has had to consolidate with Capital District. One of the reasons the access to labor pool was our CDL drivers. So it's a big concern going forward.
All right, thank you. Appreciate your being with us. Move on to probation. Our director is with us. There's one item for request. That's to enter into an agreement with KMG Monitoring Services for electronic monitoring for youth ages 14 to 17 in the amount of $10,125 for the period September 1, 23 through March 31st, 24. The funding is covered under the Raise the Age grant.
Yes, good morning. And this is something we've talked about over the last couple of months. In a bigger discussion, obviously, we've been up here practically every month talking about the pension and the cost and what we've experienced. So we haven't done electronic monitoring in a few years for a couple of reasons. During the pandemic, we eliminated that contract. And quite frankly, prior to the pandemic, we really didn't use electronic monitoring, but things have changed and we can talk about that a little more specifically. But this is a contract starting, proposed to start September 1st, go to the end of March 31st of 24. That's the state funding cycle for Raise the Age. We have money in it. We have a vendor that we've used before. And I think this gives us an option to alleviate certain situations where we put kids in detention. So it's another avenue, so we won't have to access detention in some situations, which causes a lot of problems throughout the county.
All right. This forward, Supervisor Leggett, second Supervisor Smith. Any questions? Discuss Supervisor Smith.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. My only question is, and you mentioned that the cycle for the funding, what happens April 1st, 2024?
Well, I think, well, that's a good question. I think first we'll see if we use it. That's always, if we put it there and we don't utilize it, then that's a cost that we don't need. But I think we prepared in next year's budget to put additional money in. We've already done the Raise the Age plan for the following year. And so we put that money in there. So come April 1, we would probably look to continue that contract. And we'll have a little more data of how we've used it and how it's benefited us.
All right, any other questions? All in favor? Opposed, carried. You have no discussion items. Anything else for us?
I do. So we attached a document to the agenda, and it talks a little bit about what's going on in probation and the impacts. And And we talked about detention, and Supervisor McDevitt brought up that, why we're seeing these things, and so just to give, I think, a little perspective from our side, and I brought Amy, who can talk a little bit more about the data we have, because the data shows a lot. But on the surface, I mean, the easy answer is there's more crimes, and the seriousness of the crimes. But why is that happening? Why are we using detention? There's a couple things. There's different legislations that's happened. Family First Act, which focused on keeping kids in a congregate care or foster care as opposed to placements. That's a federal government initiative that's trickled down to the states. And when that happens, it takes a while for it to get to the states and localities of how you're going to implement it. So for us, it's eliminated certain things we've done, 30-day evaluations on kids where we had access to certain facilities. We don't have them anymore. There's fewer mental health beds, psychiatric centers are getting closed down. So those kids are not getting the services. They don't get the services. A lot of times bad things happen. We have a limited amount of secure detention facilities in the state of New York, as we talked about. We can't get anybody in on any given day. And the other thing too, interestingly enough, with the state is in a time when we need detention, they've decreased the STSJP, which is, I don't know the exact acronym of it, but it's a funding stream through the state where they encourage you to use programs opposed to detention. Before last year, our detention allocation was in the neighborhood through this grant of like $226,000. They reduced it to like $80,000. For what reason? Who knows? So that limits the amount of money that we can use for detention and get reimbursed as well as program. So when you look at, the seriousness of crimes out there, there's reasons why. And I'll have Amy come up and talk about the risk assessments and the data that we take and we analyze. And I think that'll tell a little better story of there's just more crime and it's just more serious. So I'll let Amy come up. Mr. McDevitt, if you have a question.
No, just as I was struck by the last page of your document here, and I highlighted just a couple of things. Increase of youth living with their family but being housed in a hotel or with a relative due to homelessness. Increase of youth 12 and up reporting runaway or homelessness with no respite beds available in this age group. Wade House can only take 16 and up for respite. And the last item was the increase in pre-adolescent and adolescent behavioral and mental health crisis, where there is a sharp decrease in the availability of mental health stabilization beds or crisis response stabilization centers. So we kind of look at Warren County, where if you look at the demographic trends in terms of population, our population in Warren County has basically remained stable over a long period of time. So our population is remaining stable, yet it appears that our youth are maybe in a state of crisis in terms of getting into trouble, being out of control, where our population is stable. We're not Suffolk County, we're not New York City. Yet within the confines of our base, things appear youth-wise to be getting worse. So I just philosophical question, could be here all day long, and I'm just kind of.
No question. As you said, the population hasn't gone up significantly, but you see the breakdown in the family unit. The systemic changes you see on the news every day, those things happen here. It's not as publicized, but what we see day in, day out are kids with no homes, lack of supervision, no services, no aftercare programs, things like that. And what are they, what results from that are not very good things. And again, Amy's going to come up and talk about what the data we show is based on evidence-based and research we put in. So we can talk philosophically about what happens, but I think she can point to some direct things of the kids we see and the reasons why. So Amy, if you'd like to come up.
Thank you, Bob.
So besides growing vegetables and making zucchini bread, I do some other stuff in the office. Although those are the fun things. But so, Bob asked me to go through some of our data for today and extract some information that we have. So everybody is aware of what we're seeing and why we're asking for more detention beds, why we actually are placing more children that come through the juvenile justice system, why there's more police transports, and you know, what are we doing to try to problem solve these things? So why do we keep data? The Division of Criminal Justice Services requires probation departments to track data on all cases that come through the department in order to determine trends, program needs, geographic disparities, and criminogenic patterns. It also requires raise the age and juvenile data to be tracked in order to provide evidence-driven strategies to reduce juvenile crime. And probation gathers data as well for the Office of Children and Family Services for the purpose of STSJP grant funding. And that stands for supervision and treatment services for juveniles, for programs for those youth that are at risk of either PINs or JV behaviors. We are required to do this on every 6 months. So we have to provide our data to OCFS every 6 months, and we have to provide it to DCJS every year. So they track, actually every month, they track how many youth come into the system and what happens with those youth. Now, not all youth get tracked. So we have some cases that go straight to petition for family court. Those cases, as Attorney Dickey mentioned, are extremely time consuming. A lot of those youth that are coming through, we're seeing an increase in juvenile arrest. Part of that is because I think with Raise the Age, there's a lot more training for law enforcement to understand like what the process is. We have a lot more collaboration in the last couple of years about how we process these youth and, you know, some of the strategies in order to prevent crime from happening. So with that, what I think is very telling, and I put in the data that Director Yusi shared with you, is our youth assessment and screening instrument indicates drastic changes in the domains of risk for our youth. We've always had cases that were high in the domain of family because a lot of times there is lack of supervision. There's multiple different reasons that families struggle in our county. I think it's incredibly significant when I pulled this data from this year that the increase in 2019, the family domain at our highest risk was 68.8% of youth. And now that domain is 94.4%. So that's an increase of 25.3%, with the highest risk factor being family. The questions that are asked in that is if, you know, are you homeless? Have you experienced homelessness? Do you have a family member who's been arrested or incarcerated? Do you have a family member who's using or an active user or a deceased family member? Have you been a family that's been indicated for neglect proceedings? Or do you have child protective services involved? Or have you been removed from the home because of neglect proceedings? Those are all questions, as well as many other questions that indicate family risk factors for youth. That's significant. So in 5 years, we've increased family risk by 25%. That's really impactful. And that's in Warren County. And I'm sure if we compared it with other counties, like you said, it would be very similar. The other thing is mental health. Mental health has also increased that significant in 5 years. Our youth are in crisis. There are so many youth that we have. We actually are required now to do a MAISY, which is a Massachusetts screening instrument for mental health of our youth. So if they come in our department with crisis, we have to refer them immediately to either Glens Falls Hospital if they have flags, or we call the mobile crisis unit. We've never, thankfully, we've never had to send someone directly to the emergency room, but we have called the mobile crisis unit to respond because our youth are in crisis. They do not have the skills, which leads me to the next domain, which is the highest. They do not have the skills that they need in order to process their emotions, the stressors of society today. We have not been able to keep up with their needs. And I think you hear that from the Department of Social Services. And I think you hear that from mental health. We need more services. And we can, probation has limited amount of funding, like Bob said, we have STSJP. We have to put certain data has to support those programs that we use STSJP for. So our data has to indicate, and I have to collect that data, my officers have to collect that data, that those programs are working for our kids. We also have Raise the Age, and we have to support that the programs that we implement, and that's why we do a lot of our own programming in probation, are actually addressing criminogenic needs for these kids. A lot of time when kids come through to us, we have issues where they have been we have some cases right now, they have been in foster care, they've been in voluntary agencies, but they continue to commit crimes because it's not meeting their needs. So then they have to go to detention because we have to keep them in a safe facility because they're not safe. And it's because they have, family risk factors, they have mental health risk factors, and no matter where we put them, it has to be a safe environment. So those are the things that are impacting, and we will see increases. We will see youth with extreme behaviors having to go to detention and not having the detention beds we need, because that is just a fact that we've been living with for the last year. And why we need police transports, because these youth are not safe. We can't just drive them down the road. They need safe transport. So those are just some really significant factors. I have, like I said, we're required to do the data. We're required to know why we implement these programs and to support them. And we are spending a lot of time in family court and the criminal court, because youth part with Raise the Age is criminal court processing cases. It is a long process. And unfortunately, during this time, a lot of times the youth are not put on release under supervision. So the probation officer can't work with them because they haven't been court ordered to work with us. We have a lot of prevention. Actually last week I had mental health call me because they wanted to see if they could send kids to our probation bread baking event. Sure, but I need somebody from their department to be present, because probation can't just take on other youth that are not related to probation and provide programming for them. They need it, but can probation provide programming for children outside of probation? No, we can't. So I strongly encourage, to look at programs for our youth and prevention services and prevention programs that can hopefully provide them what they need before they get to the point where they're committing crimes or multiple crimes. What we're not just seeing kids that just have one pet larceny. We have a couple of those. We are seeing kids that the sheriff's department know exactly what house to respond to, or the New York State Police know this kid and family because they've been there a lot, multiple times, for multiple arrests, for multiple serious incidences. So that's what we're seeing. And again, it's not just Warren County, and it's not just, Queensbury, Glens Falls area. It's across the state and probably across the nation at this point. Any questions?
First of all, thank you. Well, you guys appear to have a rather deep understanding of the issue at hand. Okay, the problem appears large, and it, but at least I'm impressed with your understanding that there is a problem here in River City, and we're attempting, maybe with not all the resources in the world, to comprehend, to understand, and to deal with it. So I'm impressed with that, and thank you for that.
Supervisor Smith.
Yeah, I'm astounded by the numbers. I mean, this is kind of a surprise to me. I'm just wondering, because of your lack of ability to actually address a lot of these things, if this isn't something that we should forward to the Human Services and Health Services Committee, make that data available and see what they can do to help with their resources. So I don't know if we can do anything more than what we're doing now. And I'm kind of asking the committee that question.
Supervisor Connor.
Yeah, I actually think it's above that. I mean, I think that maybe our county administrator in your meetings and discussions with the other county administrators and county executives need to communicate well to the state of New York that we need a statewide approach and strategy from the state on down, at least if not the federal government, to begin to. I mean, the lack of infrastructure, the lack of, and when I say infrastructure, I don't just mean facilities, I mean the programming that goes on in and around those facilities is critical. And I think is there a statewide strategy? Is there a statewide approach that's being promoted? And if it is, you know, why don't we know about it? And it would be my position. And if there is, pass it along so we can take a look at it and see what we can do. But I mean, and it's not just here, you can see it on the morgues as well. I mean, we're out there trying to address a need that we know exists in our area, but it doesn't just exist in our area, it exists statewide. I mean, what is the statewide approach? What is this? Is there a statewide strategy or are we on our own? I mean, maybe that's the strategy that we're on our own. If that's the case, well, just tell us we're on our own and we'll do what we need to do. So.
To answer that, the question is, we are on our own. There is no statewide approach. In the state of New York, there's no one agency that oversees juvenile justice, broke up between the Office of Family Services. Which I guess is the oversight for your local DSS, but I don't know much about what they do. I don't think anybody does. And then on the other side, DCJS, Division of Criminal Justice Services, oversees your local probation department. So in some counties, like here, we do PIN, we do JDs. Other counties, DSS does PIN, they don't do JDs. And the way the funding is a lot of money's funneled through OCFS for programs. Where that goes, I'm not really sure. And on the other side, DCJS is more of a, for lack of a better word, they're viewed as a police agency, so a lot of funding doesn't come towards DCJS probation because they don't want kids locked up. So that's the thinking where the money goes on state of New York. Money doesn't come to probation side, it goes to the other side. And how that goes and where that goes, I think many people have been trying to figure that out for years. So, so I think locally you have to have your own approach because I don't think the state's much help.
Couple other comments we got, our administrator.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back to Supervisor Conover's comments. I took a note earlier when Amy was talking to get together probation, DSS and mental health and maybe even public health to talk about some of the issues and maybe quantify what our challenges are. And, you know, we've been doing in DSS, my recent experience dealing with Child and Family Services and also OTDA, temporary disability assistance in New York state. There appear to be some disconnects. I'm not sure who does what and whose responsibility it is.
Chairman Gary.
Yeah, I think every time the state changes these programs, things just go amiss and people get lost. We had a incident in Warrensburg a couple weeks ago, which, you know, we called the police made contact with the kids, and then I think they're gonna go to probation. I'm not really sure what's gonna happen with them, but, you know, you'd like to sit and be able to, I don't know if we'll ever hear any more about it, you know, the ones that did some damage at one of our rec facilities, but it just seems like every time they do a program, there's a big disconnect where it goes, who's responsible. Because I asked the police officer, you know, where are they gonna go next? And then it's turned over to this agency that may be turned over to that agency. Before, you used to be able to kind of see where they were going, and then they kind of get lost now in the whole thing. And but thankfully we don't see a lot of that, but you see enough of it. So I do think every time they change age, raise the age or any of that, it's just like, you know, the question about transcript. Well, every time they make a different program, and there's always cost added on, and it goes right back to the local municipality to pay for all the things that they do in Albany. Because they don't think it through on a local level. They just look at it from their avenue down there in Albany, but it's a big concern. And then you're right. And I'm not in the school system, but I can tell you, there's a lot goes on in those school systems that has made it difficult too. So.
All right, let's wrap up with a couple more hands. I see Supervisor Leggett.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. what Chairman Garrity brought out is that we need to look at this more holistically. Same thing with Supervisor Khan over there, because it is a huge issue all around. And when I see that 93.5% of the highest risk factor is skills domain and one sector there. And we're dealing here with about 14-year-olds. So they've been in a school system for about 10 years. And I'm going, why are they not coming through with better skills? What's happening there at the school side of things as well? Of course, you have families and it's a big issue, but this is something that needs to be addressed in a much larger conference. I'm sorry, but I have to go to another meeting.
Thank you. Supervisor McGowan.
Yes, Amy, thank you. This, I know we have sat down and we have talked and, you know, and to answer your question, a quick one is talking in schooling and that and why they haven't. But a lot of these kids have learning disabilities. All right, and Amy and I've talked about that. You know, I grew up with a learning disability and, you know, believe it or not, I was, you know, at one time a little bit of a troublemaker. I know it's hard to believe now because it does, you know, but in school, you try to get out of those, you know, you just, it doesn't work. And Amy and I have talked deeply about this. My question is, the program that we've had out there with the garden and the cooking, zucchini bread and we talked about the zucchini boats. Is that a program that maybe we can or say it's working and it's helping some of these kids? And something maybe we can project down to Albany, to the state to say, look, you know, this is what we've implicated. How about, you know, you guys open your eyes a little bit more and helping us out, expanding programs like that?
So obviously we just have 1 year and we've been pretty successful with our government this year. We didn't have very many kids that we had on probation participate, but the ones we did actually, you know, they've shown increases in their domains, skills domains, family domains, as well as mental health domains. So those are all positive things that will impact that assessment. Some things that we have seen are, you know, we opened up that zucchini bread baking day to Washington County, and I wanted to share that with everybody because Washington County Alternative Sentencing, we've always had a good connection with them. We've always had a good connection with Washington County Youth Bureau, and they sent a lot of their kids from various different programs, not just, you know, community service or alternative sentencing, but from volunteer programs that just kids that wanted to learn a new skill, which made it a really fun and successful day. So certainly, yes, but again, like probation can't be responsible for providing programming for youth that are not qualifying for probation services, which, you know, in some ways is a tragedy, but we will promote and do whatever we can to help support preventive funding and preventive programming. That's why we got grants through like the YER Connects grants. That's why we're utilizing that funding to do things like the employment mentoring program, which the state is recognizing because Director and UC and I are going to the public safety symposium for the state in September to present on that program and the impacts of that program. So, you know, those things are catching the eyes of the state because they're saying, wow, you're doing things that are working to prevent recidivism and to prevent youth going into the juvenile justice system. So yes, but it's so much bigger. We have a lot of kids again in Washington County that come and commit crimes here in Glens Falls or in Lake George. And we're processing those cases because we have to. A lot of times we send them back to Washington County and vice versa. So we are on the phone, I think probably about 10 times a week with Washington County, either Department of Social Services or probation, because we share kids. We absolutely share kids. And I don't have the data to say that right now, but I know it's a lot. I can get it for you. But yeah, those are just some pieces. But yes, the state knows we're trying.
Supervisor Thomas.
Isn't some of these things you're talking about like 4-H
Yes,
extension?
yes. And we do
Well, we
utilize
have
them.
4-H programs but we have a lack of volunteers to run them 4-H. So I mean, I think we just look in our community as where the problem is. It's not just the kids, it's the whole group. That's where the problem is. Nobody volunteers to run these 4-H programs, so they don't exist. But it's been there before, and that's probably part of the reason in my mind.
Yeah, I think it is a community, it's a community issue, and I think that, you know, after looking through things, the problem solving will happen when the community does get involved. And that's why we need that support, because it's our kids. All of them are our kids. You know, even the Washington County kids are our kids at some point, they come back and forth. Saratoga kids, they're our kids. So. I think.
All right, money.
Just
Go ahead.
a comment to a county administrator. I mean, in your discussions, I mean, if, for example, on detention facilities, if we need to have a regional approach, what is that region? Perhaps it includes Washington, perhaps it includes other areas, and what do we need? How much do we need? And how are we going to pay for it? I mean, otherwise, you have no place to go with some very serious and dangerous offenders. Am I correct? And so, I mean, that's when my brief reading of the report. So, you know, we have to think about that, I think. That's why I mentioned that you would think that if a regional approach, and I would suspect that would be the case, a regional approach is needed on that one issue, for example, you know, wouldn't you think there'd be some type of statewide strategy for identifying the regions and promoting the development of this infrastructure? I don't know. But where my head goes.
All right, last word on this, county attorney.
And I mean, from my experience, majority of the counties have contracted with non-secure or secure facilities for beds. I know they pay a daily rate just to maintain the bed. So when we're looking to get a youth in a detention facility, it's incredibly difficult because they exclude the contract beds immediately, you know, from our consideration. And then majority of the counties are fighting for those couple spots left in those facilities. Sometimes the facilities, I know the sheriff's department one time had to drive out to the Steuben County facility to drop a kid off. It's like 5 hours away because they're the only facility in the state with a bed, you know, for a youth who got held in court because he was being uncooperative and hostile. And it's just, we're seeing more and more of these aggressive and violent felonies that we don't have a place to put them. And I think the changes to the legislation from 2018 through 2020 with the raise the age, with the reduction of the ability to use pins for placement, the ability to place kids in patient diagnostic facilities, it's really hurt us. And that's why we're detaining more children. That's why we're placing more children. And before this year, we've placed little to none in the state custody. And I think we've already placed 2 or 3 in state custody this year. So we're definitely seeing an uptick in the need for detentions, the need for beds, and the need for placing kids, fortunately.
All right, thank you. Obviously, much more work and discussion on this. It's clearly not just a government resolution. So thank you both for being here very much. We greatly appreciate it. We'll move on, try to get back on schedule with the Office of Emergency Services. Sam Ray's here. We've got 3 requests. The first is resolution amend resolution number 56 of 2023, appointing members of the Warren County EMS Advisory Board, and Anne Marie has provided a list of those names. Is there, Anne Marie, you need any additional information on that?
No, the only thing we're doing is swapping out members in Bolton. The previous member no longer was able to do it, so we're just switching to a different member from Bolton.
Motion by Supervisor Smith, second Supervisor McGowan. Any question on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carry. The second is resolution request to amend resolution 583 of 2021, adopting revised credit card policy to authorize credit card to be issued in the name of the OES director. My credit card policies attached for your review. Everybody?
Yep, so we're looking, we've discussed this quite often and we thought that it might be time to ask for it, so we're not caught in a situation where we aren't able to solve something. A lot of times, you know, we do travel, we go out for educational and conferences and stuff like that. And anytime that an emergency might pop up, it generally takes us away from our home base, so we could be out anywhere where we might have a need to make a purchase, whether it be gas or something else, but it would just make it a little bit easier for us.
That's the county administrator. You support this? Yes, Mr. Chairman. Okay, motion move forward. Supervisor McDevitt, second. Supervisor Smith, any question? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Last request is to transfer funds to cover the projected budget deficit in civil defense hospitalization codes due to a qualifying event and change in employee coverage. Emery?
Yep, so one of our employees did need to move up to the family coverage, which increased that amount for us. We do have funds in our other areas to be able to cover that, so we'll be.
Thank you. Motion forward. Supervisor Smith, second. Supervisor McGowan, any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carrie, Emery, anything else for us?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, thank you for being with us. Move on to the sheriff. Sheriff, what's, well, we have a question.
Just a
Supervisor
quick,
McDevitt.
you know, in going through this, the word ghost credit card came up a couple of times and I looking at it, I'm trying to think to myself, what is a ghost credit card? And then I went back and reread the, you know, in the early part of this documentation there. Ghost credit cards, not a plastic card, but they're used for volume purchases. So I'm making a comment, but I answered my own question. A ghost credit card there is a ghost credit card. So, thank you.
Question Supervisor McGowan?
Yes. Emery, we talked earlier this week, I think it was Monday, on the video of the program you just had and going public. I did talk to our administrator. And it's been brought up by a couple people, you know, of being able to do things on or view it on, participate, especially on something as important of what you held. And I appreciate you sending the information on to one particular constituent, and that was thankful. But I had talked to the administrator, and we do offer programs, and especially in the safety, which the whole county can benefit from, and maybe even help before emergency services come. So I'd like to look in the future of what we can do to put something on on YouTube when it's this important, where it involves so many people. But again, thank you for sending it out. I appreciate it on a Saturday too. So I know we never sleep, but
Nope, we don't.
but thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emery. Sure. All right. Got 6 items. I think we can find a couple. How to move a fresh one. Okay. Yeah, go brief update, but- Good morning.
Thank you, man.
Good morning, sure.
Oh. Yeah. Grab $120 an hour now.
Times have changed, huh?
Oh, yeah.
And that doesn't include the special tools you gotta buy to get in, your hands in them.
I don't know how we get people to do these jobs these days. It's a very sophisticated job.
All right, Sheriff, good morning.
Good morning.
The first one is amend the county budget to reflect the appropriate revenue and expense codes for the second half of 2023-24 school resource officer agreements. Can we combine that with 5 and 6? Or you want to do that separate? 5 and 6, 5 is for a resource officer agreement for Hadley Luzerne, and 6 is for Warrensburg Central School.
I have no preference and I can answer any
Okay,
questions.
so that'll be 1, 5, and 6 combined. Motion to move. Supervisor Smith, second Supervisor McDevitt. Any questions for the sheriff on this? All in favor? Opposed, carried. The second is to enter an agreement with Beaver Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram for specific service and maintenance and repairs.
Just an
Anything?
annual request or biannual request, and that was the updated request form that I provided to add the ability for a one-year extension. Niemer is the only company that bid to provide dealer-specific service and repairs for our Dodge Jeep vehicles.
Okay, motion. Supervisor McDevitt, second Supervisor McGowan. Any additional questions? Supervisor McGowan.
Yeah, is that a discounted rate we get from Neighbor?
That's what they bid
Woo!
through the purchasing, and
That's a little,
we're bound by that.
No,
that's a little.
it just seems like, but I mean, it is a trade and the tools are expensive. You know, nowadays it's hard to get your hand in there. I remember sitting on the fender well of my 58 Ford with a 73 302 in it. And I just sat there in the end, rebuilt the top half of the engine, you know, my feet dangling, so.
All right. Motion move. Any other questions?
No.
All in favor?
I,
Carry. Third is create a new position. This is related to the school resource officers. This is be utilized to provide full-time dedicated school resource officer services to the Warrensburg Central School District. Salary for the new position will be funded through an existing agreement with the school district. Any more information you need on that? Motion move that forward. Supervisor Smith, second. Supervisor McGowan. Any questions? All in favor? What? Question?
Quickly. When is this person needed?
Starts this September.
We're gonna create the position, fill it between now and then.
Next week.
We're going to assign a current officer, a seasoned veteran officer, and then backfill that position hopefully sooner than later.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Yeah, thank you. Last one is request the transfer of funds from the sheriff's office to the county contingent account. Sheriff?
Earlier in the year, we were approved to receive funding for an uninterruptible power source, similar to what you'd use on a computer if the power goes out. It's used in our building to keep the lights running when there's power break, and it serves to keep everything on between the time the power goes off and the generator kicks on. The system's 20 years old. It is reached end of life. You did the approval for $30,000 for this project. We started to take a closer look at that, realize that's not going to be enough funding. We're returning the money back to contingency, and we will work through this project in the budget process for 2024.
Motion. Supervisor Conover. Second. Supervisor Smith, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. You have one discussion item, that's the 2023 overtime expenditures and reflections.
I'm sad to see Supervisor Leggett left. I know that he had some questions. I'll say our budget came under scrutiny recently, and it's the Warren County Sheriff's Office budget. But it's not my budget, it's our budget. It's something that we put a lot of thought and purpose into preparing and implementing each year. When you take a look at this document, we purposefully under budget the overtime codes in the sheriff's office. And we do that knowing that each year we're going to have surplus in regular salaries because we'll have vacancies. If somebody retires at a higher rate of pay and we hire a new officer, they come in at a lower rate of pay. So it's a bit of a risk or a gamble the way that we budget, but most years we are able to make up that deficit through surplus. There was a public statement that was made recently about the 2022 budget, and it's really important. The budget officer I know understands it. Chairman Garrity understands it. It's really important for me that all of you in here understand exactly what we're doing. In 2022, our budget was over by $770,000 plus. And it was over because we were able to retain employees and we didn't have as much surplus. We were able to fill vacancies in corrections sooner because the civil service allowed us to go to a program where we didn't have to wait for the results of a test. So those vacancies were fewer and farther between, which is wonderful. When you look at this document, every year, our overtime in corrections is significant and it's always far over what we budget for. Every hour of overtime that's worked in our correctional facility is mandated. It's required for staffing. It's dictated by the people that we house and the care and supervision that's required of them. We don't have any instances where we authorize employees to take leave and that leave would allow the generation or creation of overtime. Our budget in corrections is dictated by supervision of the housing units. Our budget on the road patrol is dictated by public safety. And those needs have increased significantly. We talked just a little bit earlier on, and a 17-year-old child who commits a serious offense today under the new raise the lower age, we are traveling for 5 hours one way to bring that child with 2 officers on an overtime rate into a courtroom to have them appear for 15 minutes and turn around and have to drive them right back out another 5 hours. 3 years ago, that same 17-year-old would have been charged, introduced into the adult criminal justice system, and would have been secured in our correctional facility. Medicated assisted treatment. There are so many unfunded expectations and requirements on our sheriff's office right now that are going to always increase our budget. The Warren County Sheriff's Office budget will never decrease. It's just never going to happen. If anybody tells you that it's going to, they're misinforming you. 86% of our budget are our people. They are the salaries, they are the benefits. The vast or overwhelming majority, the remaining 14% are contractual services. We have to pay for food, we have to pay for fuel, we have to keep our lights on. So it's alarming when there's a public statement that's made from our treasurer, someone that could very easily explain this away as I'm explaining to you right now, that leads the public to believe that we are all acting irresponsibly and we are just not good stewards of our taxpayer dollars. I would implore you, if any of you have questions of me, you want to go into further detail with any of this, now's maybe not the time. I know another meeting and another group's coming along behind me, but you all have my cell phone. I'd be happy to answer any of these questions. It's very easily explainable. But our sheriff's office has never been positioned in a better spot than we are right now. I know that we have excellent relations with all of you in this room, and we all take our jobs very seriously. I take this very seriously, and when there is scrutiny on our sheriff's office and there's scrutiny on our budget, I'm not going to stand for it. So that's all I have to say. If you have any specific questions that relate to our budget and you want to ask them now, I'd be happy to answer. And if not, if you want to meet, please, I would ask you to reach out.
Chair McGarry.
Yeah, most of us sat in when the Commissioner of Corrections came in several years ago and laid out the plan for the correctional facility. They were very adamant about there are no shortcuts to be taken over there. And if you have a shift that requires 13 people and you only have 9 or 10 eligible, then you fill those other positions with overtime. So, and it should be it shouldn't be alarming. Well, it is alarming. You're paying overtime. You don't want to, but he is correct. There was, I know in our civil service meeting the other day, Trish had talked about being able to get exams quicker to fill some of these long-term positions, the positions that take time quicker. So there are things being done, but the overtime in corrections is mandated by the state of New York Commission of Corrections. We all know that. We sat in there, asked very pointed questions back in maybe 2012 or, well, I don't know when it was, but I just remember we had them come up. They spoke to the whole board of supervisors. They explained the situation on the corrections division. So it was a shame when you're going to see that in that report that's put out monthly. Understood. But the reason is because you have to fill positions. You may not be able to do it on straight time if you don't have enough employees to fill the positions on straight time, but you're going to do it on the overtime. But we have to. We can't just ignore what they tell us, to my knowledge. And then, as Jim spoke to, the special things that happen within the correction facility. I mean, the one-on-ones, we saw that when we toured maybe 3 years ago. we took a tour. You have inmates that require 24/7 one-on-one watching. Or if they go to the hospital, it takes two correctional officers to take an inmate down to the hospital for treatment, and they may have to sit there. Could be hopefully 3 or 4 days, but all these things add to the overtime, so it shouldn't be a secret. That the overtime it's really mandated overtime, mandated by the rules put in by the state of New York in most cases. I can't say every case.
Other questions on this?
Could I add one more point? I'm sorry. The other thing, you mentioned the report that comes from the treasurer's office, and early on in my tenure, I would lose sleep over that report because we don't ever want to be on a list that's, shed in a negative light. And I understand that that's not the intention, but Sheriff's Office Correctional Facility receives revenue, and we receive revenue for housing federal inmates. And that's a number that when we sit and we talk about that, we say every year, it's a moving target. You never know where it's going to land. Our first 2 years, we budgeted quite low, and we just blew it out of the water. We doubled it far beyond. This year, we are considerably below that range. And the reason why, to 2020, 2021, our correctional facility was really the only one in our region that was accepting federal inmates through COVID. And you might say, well, Sheriff, that seems a little bit irresponsible. When we did that, we went over a year and a half without a single case of COVID entering our correctional facility. Our protocols were sound, we were accepting them, and it had no adverse effect. We were collecting revenue. When things open back up, you have correctional facilities that are closer to the federal courts. So now the federal inmates are shifting back south. I reached out to our local U.S. Marshal early on this year, I believe it was in February, and I explained to him, we were good to you through the past 2 years. Could we get 10 inmates, 15 inmates, and keep that consistent population throughout the year? I was assured that we could, and it just never happened. So I have no control of that. When you read that on that monthly report, it's not because we're not trying to get that revenue. It's just that revenue has dried up.
Thank you, Sheriff. Anything else, Sheriff, on this? We greatly appreciate your time and your explanations, justification on this. The answers are there. If you look for them, the answers are fairly clear. Supervisor Conover.
Are we ready to adjourn?
Privilege of the floor. I have a comment. County Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a discussion item I'd like to bring before the committee, and I ask your permission to move forward on this. This is our ongoing saga with animal cruelty cases in this county. And as of late yesterday afternoon, thanks to the negotiating skills of Ms. Julie Butler, our purchasing officer, and Under Sheriff Terry Cuomo, we think we've come up with an agreement with SPCA of upstate New York. Basically, they will handle all of the county's animal cruelty cases for us, and there'll be fees associated with that. Boarding fees, vet fees, we agree to pay all those fees for the animal cruelty cases. But there are other things that go into this contract. And when I talked to you the last time, we said they were asking for $15,000 a month. Then the amount we've kind of tentatively agreed to is about $8,000 a month. And what we get for that $8,000 a month could be significant for us. SPCA is going to conduct training for the sheriff's office, 2 training sessions a year. And we've been asking for that for a long time about animal cruelty. They don't have a good training program for that, and they've offered to do that. They will also, and this is probably the most significant, I think, right now, if you talk to the sheriff, they're getting on an average about 1,000 calls a year on someone calls in and says, I've got an animal cruelty case. And a lot of times we dispatch a patrol officer out there to find out that it's just someone complaining because their neighbor's dog was barking too loudly. SPCA of Upstate has agreed to filter those calls for us. So during the day, the calls go into them. They're skilled to talk through the people who are making the complaint and help determine whether it's an actual case where we need to dispatch a patrol officer out there, or if it's a case and can just be handled over the phone. And that could be a significant savings for the sheriff's office in sending people out there. They're also, they have an attorney that they work with ASPCA, who will help with the cruelty situations that we do have in the county. And the other thing they've agreed to do is right now they're entering into a contract with Queensberry to do dog control with Queensberry. A lot of our other towns have dog control officers, but aren't available after hours. So if one of our patrol officers picks up a dog that's appears to be abandoned or anything right now, we don't have a place to take those in many cases. I think somebody mentioned that the undersheriff actually took a dog home overnight one time that they picked up. And SPCA of Upstate they have a code that you can go in and deliver an animal, probably a dog, after hours and leave the dog in the SPCA facility, and they'll work then with the town dog control officers after that to move, to take appropriate action. So we, as we discussed, we believe it's a reasonable solution. Right now, we have no solution. And if we don't have someone to do animal cruelty cases, the sheriff's office is going to have to do that. There's no funding for this in the sheriff's office, so we'll have to come up with funding. So we'll take it to the finance committee if we can come up with an agreement, and if this committee agrees that we should move forward with a contract like this. So
Where are they located?
they're located right across from the airport, basically on Queensberry Avenue. They're actually in Washington County. So Washington County, I've been talking to the county administrator there as well. And she wants to move forward with some type of agreement as well for Washington County. So they want to partner with us a little bit on this too.
Thank you. President McConnell?
Yeah, just a quick question, because I always hear, you mentioned, there will be fees associated with, boarding fees, stuff like it. I mean, is the county paying for that, or does that get back charged to the people? That are getting charged with the, cruelty to animals, and then you hear the case, well, they're neglecting because they didn't have any money. Well, then, do we attach that to their taxes? I mean, I know my dog was spoiled rotten. All right, I love that little dog, but he did cost a lot of money. So I had to work harder, so, people get animals and sometimes, they cost a lot of money, my kids, I want to get a dog. Well, you want to do this is what the pay is, the bet you got, and then you start adding it up and you start thinking. So, when these cruelties, I feel bad. But, it's hard to say to someone that, that doesn't have an animal, like, say I don't now, to contribute to someone else that, is neglected. So I'm just wondering, is there some kind of back charging that we can do, to help offset that cost? Is that something we negotiate to, or?
As an aside, I have 3 dogs. I'd be willing to offer maybe one for you.
I'll come up and meet him too if I'm interested.
No, so in all frankness, animal cruelty cases go before the court. And in many cases, when there's liability attached to that person, we can go back and request reimbursement for the fees we've expended. And I've been told that in past situations like this, that rarely happens, that we are able to recoup any of the money for these animal cruelty cases, because it's just, we could try to figure out another way to do it, but I think for the most part, we can.
Well, like I said, it's recoup it, but like I said, we can lien the property, but put it out in taxes. I mean, if they own the property, and that might be something we have to go to approve. I'm not trying to be a bad guy, and I really believe that we should do this, and it shouldn't be a burden to our sheriff department. But you know, it just, it's very alarming to me is these cases that do come in, and a lot of times they can get drawn out in a long time, and it's a big bill, and it's not fair to the other taxpayers that, you know, are maybe animal haters. I happen to like animals, you know. But you know, once enough, the government, you know, forking over for you know, covering the guilty all the time. Now it's time that the innocent people get reimbursed.
You need a resolution to move forward for this?
Do we need, yeah, I believe we are gonna need a resolution, so that's what I'm asking.
No?
Yes, okay, just a motion to do that and then.
Referring to finance.
Referring to finance.
All right.
I
Supervisor McCaffrey.
I make such a motion, yeah.
Second,
And
Supervisor.
I believe Chairman Garrity had a comment. I'd like to
Oh,
hear.
sorry.
Yes, you say cruelty, it could be goats or sheep or horses too. It's just not dogs, correct?
It's just not dogs. So they have two vets. One vet, they handle small animals, and they do have a vet in Granville that they can contract with. They handle large animals.
Yeah, you made it. It's just not dogs.
It's not just
animal-
dogs.
It's
yeah.
animal cruelty.
Animal.
Okay.
Yes.
Is that a
Some
second?
people included.
Yeah, so now.
I
I just wondered what he was gonna say.
Okay, thank you for pointing that. On the question, there was a comment? Yes.
This is the result of an RFP, so if the motion includes awarding of the proposal to Upstate SBCA, that would be great, because that gives me authority to do the award, and then the referral to finance for the funding portion.
Sure, that'd be fine, sure.
They can go as one.
It's gonna all go as one thing, because you can approve the contract, but if you can't fund it, it's no good.
All right.
It need to go back.
Okay. All right.
Okay, we're all in agreement?
Yeah.
Any other questions, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Any other privilege of floor comments? Sheriff, Under Sheriff, thank you for being here. Motion to adjourn. Supervisor Conover, second. Supervisor McGowan. Question?